Desiree, are you able to see people and let people in that might be in the lobby?
Yes, I'm doing that.
Great. All right, I'd like to call this meeting of the Budget and Finance Committee of the Whole to order. Ms. Camacho, could you please take the roll?
Yes. We have a note that Ms. Allard will be joining us a little bit late. So, Mr. Constant?
Oh, Mr. Constant actually sent me a note that he has to be excused for at least the first half of the meeting.
And then Mr. Dunbar?
Here.
Ms. Kennedy?
Here.
Ms. LaFrance?
Here.
Mr. Presberdia?
I see him. Cameron, can you come off mute? Okay, well, maybe he can put it in the chat.
Okay. Mr. Peterson?
Present.
Ms. Quinn Davidson?
Here.
Sarah?
Present.
Mr. Weddleton?
Here.
And Ms. Zalatel?
She said in the chat that she's here, but is having some tech issues. But I can see her here, and she said she's here in the chat.
Okay, you have a quorum.
Great. Well, so we will start with a, oh, look here, I'm getting a message. Looks like the Budget Advisory Committee chair is having some tech issues. So I think we'll come back to them and we will jump ahead one item and then come back to them. So if Mr. Frisk, if you're here, could we start with your report?
Yes, we are here. I'm actually in my office with Dan Moore. So with that said, I'll defer to Dan to give the full report that he's has provided. Quick question for you, Mr. Chair. Do you want us to share that report, or can we just have people review it on their own? What is the preference of the group?
Which, are you speaking of the report that, let's see here, the revenue summary highlights, or is
yes, sir. Yeah, yes, sir.
Yeah, I think all the members have it. But yeah, if there's some way to share it on the screen, perhaps Ms. Camacho could share it on the screen for the folks that might not have it easily accessible and can see it, and for the live stream.
I will share it. One moment.
Perfect. Thank you. All right, Dan, take it away.
Okay, all right, so thank you, Mr. Chair, for the opportunity. So I'm going to just highlight areas that had some, notable movement since the last time we met, which was a month ago. So I'm going to just go down the list, but I always start out with the very top portion where you see some narrative, just to show you where we are overall. And so in terms of the budget for revenues this year is just a little under 800 million, 792. Thus far, we have posted in SAP 759 million. So if you do the math, that's 96% realized revenue. And of course, we have about 6 weeks left in the year. So we're definitely on target to be very, very close to budget. And I'll kind of let you know what the projected bottom line number is here in just a moment. So for the revenues and we're just going to go page by page, but it'll be real quick. I'll just pick certain ones, and I will pause occasionally if there's questions. So on page one, the biggest change, really the only notable change here is on the PFD revenue. And we had already received the first batch of payment when I met with you last month. However, since then we received a second batch payment, and it came in quite a bit larger than we expected, which is good news. So so right now it looks like we'll certainly be above budget. The budget was 4.2 million. Most of this goes to the police department. It's 109% realization for this particular one, and it's about $400,000 to $500,000 of positive variance. That's all listed in various columns there on the very first item. The other two items I don't need to speak about unless there's questions because they're unchanged from last month. Okay, so I will go on to the next page, page 2. Okay, so on this page, this is mostly showing the property tax status. Real property continues to be right on target. So right now we've billed, collected, posted 99.7%. So we fully expect to meet the budget there. We don't really expect much overage. It should just be very close to the budget number. Personal property, we knew had some definite potential for negative variance, and we have now billed out all the different personal property roles. There are 6 different roles, and as a result, we know with strong confidence that there will be a negative variance. This personal property is very hard to predict because it's a self-reported tax, and the numbers reported by the businesses come in after the mill rates have been set. So it's definitely a challenge, but our projection is it'll be $2.5 million under budget for what was budgeted as revenue. And that's about what I had said previously. I think last time it might have been 2 million, so 2.5 is still in the ballpark. Okay, are there any questions to this point?
I don't see any.
Okay, I'll keep going then. All right, the next one, it's on the tail end of page 2, and then it'll carry into page 3. This is the cash pool earnings. This is the one revenue that I've always said can fluctuate significantly month to month. We never know how the year will end. And it's turned out that over the course of the last month, there was a very large swing, and unfortunately it was negative. It doesn't mean we're going to end the year that way. Hopefully it'll kind of pull back a bit, so maybe less negative by the end of the year, but it is $3 million negative revenue variance when you compare what's projected for earnings income versus what we had budgeted. And the market has been very challenging in fixed income the entire year. And if you look at index performance, negative, single-digit negative is right where it's at right now. So that's it's a reflection of what the market conditions are. Okay, so that is the biggest change from last month, the cash flow earnings, and that was a new piece of information. Last month it was a little bit slightly positive, and so I'll keep going here, and we'll get into page 3. Okay, these you can see 2 shaded rows there. These are both quarterly revenues. They're both very much tied to tourism, business travelers. Very much affected by COVID in 2020. This is room tax and rental vehicle tax. They typically move in about the same degree in terms of trending. And I would say, well, I'll just cut to the chase here. We did receive 3rd quarter information for both these revenues. We now expect with high confidence room tax, this is just the general government portion of room tax, will bring in an additional $2 million for this year. And for rental vehicle tax, which is actually quite a bit smaller tax overall, it's maybe 1/5 of what is budgeted for room tax. That smaller tax in itself is bringing in additional $2 million over and above what was budgeted. The returns from the rental vehicle area were extremely strong. Obviously, people know the pricing was just sort of out the roof, and it'll show. We don't expect that kind of extraordinary year to recur next year. We've definitely suggested a pullback when we gave our estimates OMB. So those are the 2 revenues. Those are both positive, and I'll pause there because I may have some questions.
Yep, I have Ms. Quinn-Davidson in the queue. It looks like if folks are having trouble with the queue, please send me a text. Someone said that it was not working, but it looks like Austin is in the queue. So, Ms. Quinn-Davidson.
Are you on mute?
Yeah, Ms. Camacho, it seems like some folks are having trouble unmuting. I think that Ms. Quinn-Davidson is texting me saying she's having trouble unmuting. Is there something different about this versus it?
No, there isn't. They should be able just to unmute themselves. I can see that Ms. Quinn Davidson's not disabled on my end, so she should be able.
I'm here, Mr. Chair.
Oh, there we go. Okay, great.
Yeah, to the extent other folks are having tech issues, I couldn't write in the chat and I couldn't unmute until I restarted the program. So that might be what other people are experiencing too. Thanks for that information, Dan. That's really helpful. So what was the total amount that was collected during the third quarter? It sounds like you got those numbers in.
I do. Do you know, Travis? Do you recall what third quarter was? 11.3 million. Yeah, I don't know if I have that right in front of me. I will say for the year 2021, we're projecting 27.5 million total for room tax, if that helps.
Yeah, if you wouldn't mind, if you have that info, just sending. I'm just sort of curious since it looks like those numbers are trending up. And then one other question is, have you received, for the last month for October, did you get information for some of the larger hotels? I assume you did if you got Q3, but just curious.
Yeah, we have not yet received that. We usually give them 30 days after the month to report those interim informational bits of information returned to us. So it won't be until a little bit later this month that we'll know how October was, how it went. October, the whole fourth quarter is usually quite small in the scheme of things. I think it might be like 14% of the grand total for the year. So we don't expect a lot of movement in the fourth quarter.
Okay, but we don't even have those included yet.
It's not available yet.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Ms. Quinn Davidson, this is Travis. Dan is actually sitting in my office and he doesn't have the information in front of him, but I do. The third quarter collected was $11.3 million.
Great. Thanks, Travis. Thanks to
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Do you have any other further questions on this topic, Ms. Quinn Davidson?
No, not at the moment. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I actually do have a question for both Mr. Moore and Mr. Frisk. Perhaps more from Mr. Frisk as kind of a policy question. And this applies to both the room tax and to the personal property tax, which we just heard came in softer than expected. So the room tax is obviously recovered, but I don't think it's recovered yet to 2019 level. And so my question is, we received a communication this week regarding a state program, and there's apparently $50 million available for all the communities in the state for revenue replacement. $50 million from the ARPA funds that municipalities and towns and cities can apply for. Now, obviously, if Anchorage were to get a proportional share, we'd get 20 million of that 50. Let's assume we're not going to get anywhere near that. But are we going to apply for any amount? And is it for this year or for our projections next year going forward?
Chairman Dunbar, thank you for the question. We are aware of the relief program. It's revenue relief, I think is how it's the grant. What we're looking at there is that there's a process in which you fill out information on a spreadsheet to specifically identify if you're eligible. You actually have a baseline of 2016 as your baseline, and then you bring in your 2020 revenues. There's a increasing growth number that's in the equation of 4.1%. And so as you take your 2016, they grow it by 4.1%, yada, da, da, da. You throw in your 2020 numbers and you determine where you're at compared to where you should be. We came in at 2.6% below where we should be. And in order to be eligible for the first 50 million, you have to be above 4.1%. So we are not eligible in the first tranche of money that's coming out.
It's 10%.
And excuse me, it's a 10% factor. You have to be above 10% in order to be eligible. Your revenue decrease has to be 10% or greater to be considered for the first round. I apologize. about that misinformation, but it is 10%. We went through the exercise. We confirmed our information with Mr. Robert Pearson at the state, who's administering the program, just to make sure we did it right. We've done it right. We're not required to submit an application at this time. We only submit an application for money once you become eligible. So we will keep track of that. We will see when the next tranche comes. We will do the process again and see if we become eligible at that time.
That's interesting. I mean, have you thought about speaking with any of our many state house or state senate representatives about this, or how this program was designed? I mean, it seems kind of remarkable you'd have a statewide revenue, relief program, and 40% of the state in Anchorage would be totally ineligible through a pretty, I mean, it sounds like a kind of an arbitrary and really complicated formula.
I can comment if you want.
I'm going to defer to Dan Moore on that specific.
Okay, sure. I'll just give a couple additional points here. The formula and the approach is actually based on federal guidelines. So the state has to follow that. What they do is, and they also say, we're not going to look at the specific revenue lines where you got really badly hurt by COVID. We're going to have you report your aggregate revenues in total, and then we're going to have you strip out a few things like federal PILT and things like that that they don't want us to count, right? So the issue for Anchorage is we have a government that does not have sales tax, like a general sales tax. And most of these other communities would have gotten hit harder because they did have a general sales tax. But because we have property tax as more of an anchor revenue, our percentage of loss did not get to 10%. It was at, I think when we reported at the end of last year, it was like 4.5, something like that. So, and then when you do this adjusted aggregate revenue figure that the federal government and the state government require, our adjusted loss was like Travis said, 2.6%. The threshold is 10%. So we're really quite far from there. And it was just focusing on 2020. They will come back in future years. It's possible maybe they'll change the rules to broaden it, because maybe they'll find that some of the bigger cities don't qualify. I'm not sure.
And Chair Dunbar, I believe that one of the priorities for the state is to actually tier this out to get to the communities that were the most impacted and saw the most revenue loss. Yeah, we're 40%, like you said. But when you have these smaller communities that are losing 20-30% of their revenue, they're the ones that are have the greater impact and could use the program more than us, in all honesty.
No, I'm sympathetic to that, but I mean, what it sounds like is that Anchorage has been, over the last 5 years, much more stable in our revenues and performing better with both our revenues and our economy than a lot of other places in the state. And we're kind of being punished for it, although the fact that it comes from federal guidelines, indicates that we kind of got caught up in a much broader program. Okay, well, thank you for that. That's been really informative, because I was wondering if we were going to qualify for any of those funds, and it sounds like we won't. Okay, so I think we can keep moving forward then.
Okay.
Sure. Any other questions when it comes to the alcohol? I'm sorry, the room tax. So, Mr. Moore, do you want to keep going?
Yep, I'll keep going. Thank you. The only other thing on the page that we're on right now, I just want to highlight that motor fuel tax is now projected to have a negative variance of $400,000, and that could be due to maybe less circulation in those months of August, September. That's just a possibility. Okay, that's all for page 3. If we go on to the next page, this one really nothing particularly changed in a big way. I will say the police department traffic fines are now projected to come in at 111% of what was budgeted. It'll be about a $500,000 excess over budget. That money stays with the police department. And as I had stated in prior meetings, that's very much because of the increased grant funding for traffic enforcement. So that's what's behind that. I did look at the number of citations. The police department was able to provide that to me recently. For this year to date, there are 34% more citations that have been issued than the same time period last year. So that gives you some sense of how things changed. Okay, and I think last year they may have not done as much enforcement because of COVID. I would imagine that might be true. All right, so then we go on to page, the last page, page 5, and this is where there is a shaded area, and this is the overall summary. And what we do is, we know there's, almost $800 million of revenue. We pick those revenues that are the most significant, and that probably accounts for 97% of all revenue. So, there will be some variation with all the other miscellaneous revenues we didn't cover, but really we're capturing all the big stuff. So this should be a pretty decent projection. Right now, we're projecting, when we compare to the budget for these major revenues that we've highlighted on the previous pages, a $1.6 million negative revenue variance for the year, plus or minus $500,000. So it's going to be very, very close to budget, not a big variance in the scheme of things, and very, should be quite manageable in terms of years past. So, yep.
And to add on to that particular point, so just to do the quick math, if we were to say that we actually had a $2.1 million miss, that there's that variable of $500,000 plus or minus. So worst case scenario, we missed this budgeted revenue number by $2.1 million. That still means that we actually realized 99.7% of our budgeted number, which is on a $750 million revenue. If you're off by $2.1 million, that's a good number.
Yep, yeah, that's a good way of saying it. And then last thing, Mr. Chair, I just wanted to inform the committee of 2 other types of revenues that are not, they don't feed into the general government in terms of spendability here, sort of normal spendability. One is Building Safety Fund. That one is now, it has exceeded budget, and the projection at the moment is $300,000 over budget. That money again stays within the Building Safety Fund. The last one, and I know this is definitely of interest to the committee and to the assembly as a whole, the alcohol tax. We look at it every single month. And what we found is that the month of, I guess it'd be September, which is the most recently reported month, it actually was down from what we had anticipated. It was at 78% of what we would have expected for that month. The prior month, August, was at 92%. So it's probably due to the numbers, health-wise, COVID, all that kind of stuff, less circulation in bars, restaurants, et cetera. So that's one possibility. So anyway, because of that, last month we projected $1 million variance positive with alcohol. Now it's $500,000. We're still positive, but it's just not as positive and dollar-wise as it was a month ago. We do expect the numbers. I don't expect the numbers to stay down like at the sort of the sub 100% level for the final 3 months of the year. I think it should. The numbers, obviously, COVID numbers have gotten better, and then you have the holidays and all that kind of stuff. So I think we should have a decent fourth quarter, and I'm not worried that it's going to continue to erode. I think we will end up positive.
So to add on to that, specifically having spent enough time in banking with liquor companies and so on and so forth, and distributors and such, that typically your fourth quarter, being your holiday season, your Thanksgiving and your Christmas holiday timeframe, usually is when you start to see a ramp up in alcohol consumption and sales. So this tax, if we just flatline it throughout the year, we're going to have misses in certain months because there's certain activities that aren't happening. Whereas in other months, we're going to see these big spikes because of what happens. I mean, again, like I said, typically what we've seen in past in my banking experience is you see spikes in March because that's when you have St. Patty's Day. You have May, that's when you have your first outside barbecues start to happen. July, obviously, is the 4th. You see these holiday events and timeframes in which you see these spikes on the alcohol. So just an FYI, alcohol tax should be viewed in a cyclical manner because if you looked at the history of alcohol sales, you're going to see that up and down swing from month to month to month.
Thank you. We have one person. We have Ms. Quinn Davidson again in the queue. Ms. Quinn Davidson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think Mr. Frisk actually made a lot of the points or raised a lot of the questions I was thinking about. So due to the holidays, do you, either Dan or Travis, do you have a sense for how much we'll bring in the fourth quarter?
Yeah, I can answer that. This is Dan Moore. If I look at the what I call the midpoint targets that we originally projected, and this would have taken into account some of that seasonality. If I add up the next three numbers of midpoint targets, it'll be right around $2.9 million. And that's if we come in right at 100% of what we projected.
Okay, great. And that's where you got the 500,000.
Yes, correct.
Right. And so obviously with this being such a new tax that started in February, you know, we don't have a lot of historical data to rely on to show this seasonality. But again, my history in the banking industry and working with large distributors, I know that seasonality, and I've seen it from reviewing financials of these companies where you have the big swing up in the fourth quarter, and then it dies off in the first month and a half, and then it starts to pick back up late first quarter, and then late second quarter, and then all through the summer months. But anyway, I believe that does answer your question. We'll have better information next year because we will have a year under our belts and we can see the seasonality at that point.
And one just real quick point is Eric Larson, who used to work in Treasury, he's an amazing person, right? He helped to do this projection, and he looked at Fairbanks and Juneau, their history. And so they had some pre-existing history, so he modeled it after that. So these should be pretty good projections. So far this year, it's been quite good.
May I ask a follow-up, Mr. Chair?
Yes, please.
That's all super helpful. I'm trying to sort of do the math on the fly, so tell me if I'm wrong. But if the fourth quarter is presumably our biggest quarter, I know you mentioned St. Patrick's Day too, Travis, but I'm assuming with the holidays, we have a pretty big alcohol tax quarter in the fourth. And so if the expected amount is 2.9 in the fourth, but we've collected 9.3, that means 2.9 is actually less than the average of the other quarters. So something there doesn't line up to me. Can you tell me what I'm missing?
I can speak just real fast. The June through September probably average 1.4 million per month. 1.4 million per month. The outer, the non-tour season is more closer to 1.1 million per month. So if that helps.
Even during the holidays, it doesn't go up in the holidays?
Yeah, I mean, again, this is modeled after Juneau and Fairbanks, so we're assuming we're going to have a similar experience.
Okay, and just one final question, if I can, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Did you receive the data from October yet? You think you mentioned at the beginning, and I was doing something else.
It's not due until 30 days after the end of the month, so we're not there yet.
Got it. Okay, thank you so much.
Have 1 month lag on it.
Got it. Thanks, Travis. Thanks, Dan.
Mr. Chairman Dunbar, I do believe Mr. Perez Verdilla had a question. I saw a Q come up under his name, and maybe I was reading that wrong.
No, he asked to be taken out of the queue after that.
Okay.
Yeah,
Sorry.
you had already answered my question. I appreciate it. And actually, the questions that Ms. Quinn Davidson asked were exactly the same that I was asked. Thanks.
Okay, appreciate it. I just saw it pop up. I didn't realize if we had noticed it or not, so I just wanted to make sure. So that pretty much does our presentation on where we are from a revenue standpoint through October. If there's no further questions, we'll turn it back over and proceed with the rest of the meeting.
Sure. I have sort of a comment that maybe you could also respond to as well. It occurs to me, we got quite a lot of press, and obviously the hospitals were talking about it. September and the first half of October, we were leading the whole nation in COVID rates. And I know that, we heard from some tourism companies that said they had some cancellations. I'm wondering if you think that might have impact, like alcohol tax, for example, if people aren't going out. Did you see any reflection in September, October, maybe some downward pressure on any of these revenues based on, people changing their behavior in response to COVID?
So Chairman Dunbar, let's talk about tourism and the bed tax real quick. So the $11.3 million that we took in the third quarter of this year is very competitive with what you would see in our 2017, 2018 timeframes pre-COVID third quarter bed tax information. I just happen to have the information in front of me because I did a bond presentation for rating companies yesterday. So in 2017, third quarter was 10.8 million, 2018, 11.7, 2021, post-COVID per se, 11.3. That's very significant for us as a leading indicator. However, to your point, though, with the Delta variant strain that's hit and the uptick, we're not sure if we're going to see a correlation in our tourism industry next year. Typically, fourth quarter is a slower time frame for us, usually around $4 million in bed tax. So at this point, it's too early for us to know if that is going to impact it. We'll have a better idea when we go into the basically January timeframe if there was a significant impact from the potential of the numbers being up. Does that make sense?
Yes, and I think we all hope that by this time next year that COVID will be a thing of the past. Moving on then, I think we can go back to unless there are any other questions about the revenue presentation, we'll go back to the Budget Advisory Commission and hear their report if there's someone here that can speak to it. Lindsay or Anna, is there anyone here to speak for the Budget Advisory Commission? If you are trying to speak, we might not be able to hear you. Okay. Let's go on in the presentation then. We will come back and please send me a text if there is some tech issue. Next, we have Marilyn Bonzoff on the schedule. Ms. Bonzoff, are you here?
Yes, thank you.
Great. Are you able to give us an update?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, great.
I do have a draft version of the budget to actuals report. Would you like me to show it?
Yes, and I'll just say for Desiree, I'm getting text from Ms. Hobson and Ms. Brawley that they can't seem to unmute to speak. So I'm not sure. Those are folks from the Budget Advisory Commission. Do we have any sense of why that might be the case?
If they are dialing in, they'll need to *6 to unmute themselves. I don't see them as attendees in the meeting with their names. So if they're dialing in, *6 to unmute.
Yeah, and Ms. Quinn Davidson suggested trying to hang up and then call back in. That worked for her, so there might be something going on our end. Ms. Hobson, did you try the *6 thing?
Can you hear me?
Yes, is that you, Ms. Hobson?
This is Lindsay. Can you guys hear me?
Yep, I can hear you, Lindsay. Thanks a lot.
All right, thanks. Anna, were you going to show something? I think I heard you say that.
No, that was Ms. Bonzoff from the administration.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I couldn't. Okay. So through the chair, sorry for the technical difficulties there. I have been here and listening and trying to speak periodically, but I'm here now. So on just a quick update from the Budget Advisory Commission, we did hold a special meeting on October 27th, at which time Ms. Bonzoff did give a presentation on the budget, and the members of the committee discussed the resolution. We then met again on November 4th as part of our regular meeting. And further discuss the resolution. I would note that sort of a concern that has come up over the last few weeks is, I would characterize it as disappointment that we did not have more direct engagement from the administration on the budget rollout process and presentation. And so, I just think that perspective really gives great insight and context when we're talking about the budget and the impacts and sort of where the administration is coming from with some of these proposals. And so through that, during that November 4th meeting, we did walk through a resolution draft, which we then voted to approve by email and was approved on November 9th. And just to quickly walk through a couple of the resolutions there, I would say that, again, I would think that the primary focus in terms of the Budget Advisory Commission looking at the 2022 proposed budget is really looking at the alcohol tax, and in particular, the cuts to pre-K funding and the mobile crisis team. And so much of our resolutions are sort of geared toward that and really not making a recommendation one way or the other, but really wanting to flag that for the Assembly to take a careful look at as you consider the budget. That's all that I have.
Thank you very much, both for the work that you do. Ms. Brawley, do you want to add anything to that? If you can unmute yourself. If not, that's fine. Yeah, again, I really appreciate. Oh, we have Mr. Perez-Rodilla in the queue.
I can hear you, Anna.
Yes, we can hear you, Anna.
Thanks. Sorry, that was just elaborate setup to say I don't have anything to add.
Okay, Mr. President, you have a question?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So I understand that the letter, I want to make sure I got it. There was a little bit of a cutoff. They expressed concerns about the mobile crisis team, and what were the other two items?
Well, I was just really sort of under the umbrella of the alcohol tax, looking at cuts to the pre-K funding program and also the mobile crisis team. I mean, there's various other ones. Those are two that came to mind. Services in response to domestic violence, sexual assault, violent crime, just some of these things. We also looked at the cut to the AEDC. And also the cost shift of the school resource officer. So there are just sort of a number of considerations that we wanted to flag.
Great, thanks for that. I wanted to make sure that those areas were highlighted. And I guess I just wanted you to expand a little bit on your experience working with the administration on the budget and how that has differed this year from the past in terms of just your involvement in the development. Can you speak to that a little bit about how that has changed and how that potentially led to you not having as much voice in what was created?
Sure, through the chair. I think historically we've always had a member of the administration there as part of the budget presentation that the OMB usually provides. And so in the past, for example, Jason Bockenstead was able to answer questions that were really directed at the administration. And so we just did not have that perspective. I think we certainly understand that this is a time of transition from one administration to the next, and there are going to be some bumps and changes along the way. We just simply did not have that perspective this time. And so just going forward, we certainly want to be able to have that because we had unanswered questions going into the resolution drafting process. And we've never, as in terms of just sort of the historical experience on the commission, we had not found ourselves in that situation before and just felt a little bit uncertain as to how to proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just one follow-up.
Yes, go ahead.
And I just want to make sure that I'm clear, and I understand you're being thoughtful and cautious in your comments. But when you say perspective, is part of what the information that you didn't have, the rationale behind some of the decisions that were being made? Is that part of what was missing that you had in the previous years, but you didn't have this year?
Yes, exactly. Through the chair. Yes, thank you.
Okay, thanks. Thanks very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Perez-Revilla. Ms. Quinn Davidson, you're in the queue.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to Ms. Hobson for being here and presenting to us. We really value your guys' opinion, and it's nice to have you as part of our meeting. I guess questions maybe a little similar to what Mr. Perez-Revilla was asking. I just wanted to make sure, since there were some issues with meeting in the last month or two, I don't know exactly when, that you now have a staffer assigned to you. I know with Carl leaving OMB, I just don't know the status of that. And while we have Marilyn here and we have Travis here, they might be able to tell you, who the best contact is, who they'll be sending to BAC meetings if that hasn't already been established. So I guess question to Lindsay, is everything sort of fixed now? And then if not, maybe we can get Travis and Marilyn to weigh in on how we make sure you have the support you need.
Through the chair, we do have Lila and we do have Marilyn, and so in terms of that level of support, I do think that we are established. I think that in terms of having a representation from the administration, I do think that was lacking, and then also just sort of where this all fell in the budget cycle and sort of this having a new OMB director with Carl, giving a preliminary presentation that maybe wasn't quite developed, and then just a transition to Marilyn. I think that part of it is how it got caught up. The timing was unfortunate for one thing, but going forward, we would like to have a representative from the administration, especially to be able to talk about the rationale and the context for budget decisions.
Okay,
I'm not sure if that answers your question.
Yeah, go ahead, Ms. Quinn Davidson.
Yeah, thanks, Ms. Hobson. I guess I would just ask Travis, since he's here, if he has any thoughts on that. And I know, Travis, that it sounds like Marilyn's already coming, so maybe Lindsay's looking for a little more, I don't really know, but would you mind just weighing in on that, Travis, and ways we can support the BAC?
Through the chair, Ms. Quinn Davidson, I really can't speak to this. The position of the OMB director is an appointee of the mayor, as you're well aware of. I am not involved in any discussions on who Carl's replacement will be. Marilyn is the acting director at this time. I understand that she stepped up and provided as much information as possible to the committee. But as far as my part in this, I really have nothing to add, I guess is where I'm at.
Okay, well, maybe an idea is that since Travis was here and sort of heard some of the challenges, maybe Travis, you could check and see if there are things, someone who might be able to participate in the way that Ms. Hobson's asking, and just check back with her at the next meeting.
I can bring this up to the administration, and then I would ask that actually Marilyn, in her acting capacity as director, communicate back to the committee members at that time.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Okay, thanks to you both, Marilyn and Travis.
Mr. Chair, if I could just follow up on that.
Sure.
So I guess, the other thing that Anna kindly texted me to remind me was that historically, and this is something that we had started a few years ago, but through the previous OMB director, we as a committee had sort of broken up into groups and kind of looked at the different departments within the municipality and met with department heads to find out, to really, have a better understanding of their department budgets and how they interlink, and sort of the nuances that we might not pick up by just looking at the whole document. And so we had been allowed to meet with the department heads, which was largely coordinated through the OMB office. And we were told at the beginning of the new administration that would not be happening this year. And so that is something that we would also like to resume. It just gave us a much more fulsome understanding of how the different departments' budgets work together, and helped us make better recommendations, honestly.
Thank you. No, I really appreciate that, Ms. Hobson. And I recall sitting in BAC meetings the last few years and getting these very detailed reports from Mr. Whip and hearing from the department heads as well. I'll note for the record that Ms. Allard has joined us. I don't see anyone else in the queue. If anyone else joins the queue, we will go back to Ms. Bonzoff for the budget update. Okay, Ms. Bonzoff, do you have a presentation or just do you have slides or not this time?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I can show the draft. I have the draft documents for the budget to actuals, but apparently I don't have presentation ability in Teams at this time. I can walk through them verbally if that's acceptable, or what would you prefer I do?
Why don't you email them to Desiree and start going through them verbally, and then Desiree, if you could post them once you get them.
I've just made Marilyn a presenter so she can share her documents.
Oh, even better.
Thank you, Desiree.
Mm-hmm.
Let me try this one more time. Okay, so thank you for the opportunity. For the first item on the agenda is the monthly budget to actuals report. Again, what I'm presenting here is a draft report. The budget to actuals reports represent departments that have positive or negative variances of 5% or more from the percent through the year. The third quarter report that had data through September was accepted by the Assembly on the November 9th meeting. We're working on the report through October 31st with a target of submitting it in time for the December 7th Assembly meeting. So again, this is draft. The preliminary, but we don't really expect it to, pardon?
Oh, I'm sorry, I just coughed. Go ahead.
Excuse me, sorry. The preliminary, so we're working on the preliminary information, but although October isn't fully closed, we don't expect too much more data to post to it. So I don't expect it to change too much between now and when it is presented to the Assembly. At the end of October, we're 83.3% through the year. And in this report, there are no departments that show as 5% over the percent through the year. So all of these percents by department are all under the range of 5% less than 83.3% through the year. So that's rather interesting. The three departments that we're showing as overspent last month are now within 5%, so they're not featured in the October report. Those departments, I don't know if you have an interest, those departments were economic and community development, maintenance and operations, and real estate. And it's just that, you know, as we progress further through the percent of the year, with seasonality of expenses, the percent of costs through the year are also more lined up with the percent through the year. So that's why those three dropped off. Two departments that were not previously on the report and are now are Equal Rights Commission and Finance. They weren't on the September report, but are now showing on the October report as underspent, primarily due to vacancies. We are still gathering, so in addition to the narrative for this report, we also show and present a graphic. So what I just read to you is basically in this graphic. I don't know if this is something, it's rather small. It might, I don't know if there's use in, excuse me, me scrolling through the screens. I guess if you'd like me to stop at each schedule, there's 5 schedules in this report, which is the budget to actuals by department overall. And the percents that I just read to you are the percent spent. So they're in this column here. And then additionally, we'll have the same actuals, but broken down between labor and non-labor. And then also as bar graphs. We do have the overtime also with this report. I think last meeting, a question arose in regards to a concern over the health department's overtime. The health department did note that they are overspent in overtime. They, due to added workload without resources, like administering the CARES grants and ARPA projects, CARES projects and ARPA projects, they're understaffed in a couple areas and there's turnover. But although they're overspent in overtime, their labor overall remains underspent, and they're still anticipating to come in at or under budget by the end of the year. Speaking of that, so we are still gathering projection information from departments, and although the departments are not all departments show on this report, and not because they're not outside of 5% spent through October, the police department is at this time anticipated to possibly be over budget by the end of the year. And then possibly also equity and justice in the area-wide fund may be over budget due to unanticipated leave cash in. We're still gathering projection information from departments, and additional postings will occur through the end of the year, and the departments will continue to manage their costs. And that is my report for the preliminary budget to actuals for October.
Great. And so this will be emailed to the assembly, is that right? Or this will be on which, this will be submitted to the assembly. Which agenda again?
December 7th is when we anticipate to get it through.
Okay. And then, so I guess, could we get the preliminary and post it on the website so people can just see what we were talking about today?
Yeah.
Obviously it'll become public on when it's submitted to the agenda, but I think it would be helpful also to have it posted to our website today, and just with the understanding that it's preliminary. Are there any questions for Ms. Bonzoff? I don't see any in the queue, and I haven't received any texts. So yeah, thank you very much for your report.
Thank you.
Great. So after that, we have other business, legislative priorities for the state legislative program, and budget items for 2022. I don't have anything specific planned for any of those three items. Do any of my colleagues have anything they want to talk about that fits under those categories? Ms. Quinn Davidson, you're in the queue.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Feel free to tell me if this is not the right time to ask this, but seeing that budget item just reminded me, would Travis or Marilyn be willing to just talk about the legislative program for 2022 and sort of what the goals of the administration are in working either with the state or federal governments? For instance, we've often put the port as one of our top priorities, and I just don't know where that communication is, or if they're still, if that's still the priority, if there's something else.
Would someone from the administration like to speak about that? And I know this is about the time the legislative committee usually stands up or has stood up and is working with the administration on the resolution that we pass for legislative priorities. Has there been discussion of budget asks of the state or federal government?
Through the chair, Mr. Dunbar, this is Travis Frisk. I can't speak from a budget perspective. I can reiterate, and I think this is public knowledge, and I'm not divulging anything that hasn't already been spoken to, but The Port of Alaska is a major priority for the mayor. And it is my understanding is that he has been in communication with the legislature, the governor and such about getting funds to help with the modernization plan. I mean, that's a standard. That's a huge project and it is a priority. I know that for a fact. As far as anything else from a budget perspective of requests from the state or anything like that, I have to defer. I'm not in those communications. I am involved in the port side of it because I'm involved in the plan of finance for that. And so therefore I know of the requests and such, but the port is a major priority. That's been from August on since he got here. So that's about as good as I can get for this meeting.
Thank you, Travis. Mr. Frisk. Austin, do you have any follow-up on that?
No, and I just appreciate Travis trying to answer. Sometimes we have questions people don't expect. So thank you for sharing with us what you know.
Absolutely. Ms. LaFrance.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And this actually is not a question about priorities, but since we have a bit of a captive audience with Mr. Frisk here, I was hoping I could just ask a question. I had someone from the board of directors from a nonprofit inquire about a grant that they were awarded from the municipality in July. And I haven't received information yet on where to direct them on how to get an update on the status of that, and was just wondering if maybe Mr. Frisk could respond or help me out with that. Thanks. And I realize this is a little off topic.
So, through the chair, Ms. LaFrance, are you referencing, I think it's Girl Scouts? Is that?
Campfire?
Campfire, I apologize. I apologize about that. I do not have any information for you. What I can do is coordinate with Ms. Domboski again on your request and see if there's been any movement as far as finding out the direction that needs to be taken.
Great. Thank you so much, Mr. Frisk, and thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ms. LaFrance. And yeah, I think a number of us have communicated with the administration about that grant for Campfire. And, it's not part of the 2022 budget. It was a grant that's been approved for a while, and for some reason it seems to have gotten hung up. Okay, well, if there's no one else, we can turn it over probably to audience participation. We have 2 minutes remaining in this meeting, so time for 1 or 2 people. Ms. Camacho, are there people unmuted? Is there anyone from the audience who might be able to participate?
There are 3 callers, and if they *6 to unmute themselves, they can speak.
Okay. Would any of the callers, if you'd like to speak, please just hit *6 and we can take your comments. Okay. All right. Well, not hearing from anyone, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
So moved.
Great. Thank you, everyone. We are adjourned.